Director of Haven, the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Agency.
I'm Abby Frank. I'm speech language pathologist at Little Harbor School.
Whitney Brown, manager of Safe Harbor Recovery Center.
Nancy Brown. It's Brown, Whitney. Hi, Whitney. Let's see. I am a retired teacher, and I'm involved in a lot of things in Portsmouth. I talked to 30 people since the last time I was here about this issue. I'll share it with you. It's incredible.
Janet Lodge, CEO, Greater Seacoast Community Health.
Lori McIntosh, and I'm the chair of Our Place, which is an organization which is going to be building housing for adults with developmental disabilities.
Lori Waltz, Executive Director of Leadership Seacoast.
Karen Conard, City Manager. I serve in an ex officio capacity. I do not vote, and I provide city resources as may be needed.
Molly Wilson, I'm a pediatric occupational therapist in town.
Great. Next, we are going to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Motion to, what did you say?
Second.
Approve the minutes.
Who
Oh.
seconded it?
Lori? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So the issue came up about subcommittees and committees, and so we are having Robert Sullivan, the city attorney, here to talk to us a little bit more about that. Welcome.
Hi, Robert Sullivan, city attorney. I'm here because the city manager told me to be here. You want me to just kind of give the, the big picture, right to know law thing. So, New Hampshire RSA 91A, the so-called right to know law that I'm sure you've all heard about, applies very broadly across the city government with regard to meetings and records. Basically make records public documents and basically requires meetings to be held in public. The statute begins with this sort of memorable phrase. Openness in the conduct of public business is essential to a democratic society. The purpose of this chapter is to ensure both the greatest possible public access to the actions, discussions, and records of all public bodies and their accountability to the people. So with that kind of opening charge, we are later on in the law instructed to resolve every ambiguity in what I'm about to talk about in favor of complying with this statute, making records and proceedings open to the public, etc. So that's, we're not on a level playing ground here. We're supposed to interpret everything to make as much public access as we can to everything. And we're pretty good about this. The city government's very good about this, I think. And what it means for you is this. In holding public meetings, public bodies, and term is very broadly defined to include legislative bodies such as the city council and any committee, subcommittee, or subordinate body thereof, or any advisory committee thereto. So it appears that the right to know law applies to you. And so you're going to have to comply with what I'm about to talk about in terms of public meetings. A lot of this, a person could quibble about some of these things, like, are you truly a public body or are you truly an advisory committee? But as I said, our charge from the law is to interpret it to find that you are a public body if possible, and so we do. So what this means in terms of having meetings is that you have several formalities that you have to observe. You have to have a meeting, well, first off, to do anything, to make any decisions or to even discuss the business for which you have been created, you have to have a meeting. And a meeting means you have to assemble a quorum of your whole body. You have to be physically present. Beyond a quorum, people can attend by Zoom, for example. But you have to have a quorum physically present at the meeting. And you have to precede that meeting with published notice in 2 public places, one of which could be the city's website, or you just post notices on this bulletin board out here in the public library. But that notice has to specify the time, date, location of the meeting, and has to be up at least 24 hours ahead of the meeting. So once you've got that kind of notice and you assemble a physical quorum of the committee, you now have a meeting and you can act. In the meeting, you have to keep minutes. Minutes do not have to be a transcript of what happened, but they have to identify who was here, what was discussed, what motions were made, who made the motion, who seconded the motion, and what the result of the vote was. And then when the meeting adjourns, that should be reflected in the minutes as well. There are exceedingly limited circumstances, probably not relevant to you, in which you can, by following another protocol, vote to go into a non-public session and exclude the public. But except for that limited situation, which it's hard for me to imagine how that might apply to you, you have to allow the public into everything, and they can film you, they can record you, they can take minutes. They are not, however, allowed to speak unless you determine to allow them to speak. At the end of the meetings, minutes have to be made available. I think it's within 72 hours. It's pretty quickly, and provided to any member of the public who asks for them. Any documents that you produce will be presumably public records, available to anybody who wants to see them, simply for the asking. They don't even have to tell you their name. They don't have to have a reason. They just have to see them, and they have a right to.
Sorry.
So that's the really quick rundown on right to know lots, like the Reader's Digest version of it.
So how does that work with subcommittees in terms of
Like-
quorums and?
Subcommittee, yeah.
Because when she told me to come here, the manager told me that's what we'll be talking about. I am ready for that. And the advisory committee is a defined term under the law. And here's what advisory committee says. Any committee, council, commission, or other like body whose primary purposes is to consider an issue or issues designated by the appointing authority so as to provide such authority with advice or recommendations concerning the formulation of any public policy or legislation that may be promoted, modified, or opposed by such authority. If your group creates a subcommittee, you're the appointing authority. And the subcommittee is now its own little public body. And the subcommittee has to comply in its own little sense with the same rules that you have to follow in that sort of the larger sense. So if you designated 3 of you to consider whether a particular street should be closed to traffic or something like that, that group of 3 is now its own separate public body because of what we've read. And they have to follow the same rules that I said that you would have to follow. Posting a notice, keeping the minutes, et cetera.
So because subcommittees probably wouldn't be voting on anything, you don't need a quorum, it's just however many?
No, that's the same, it's the same rules. If your group appoints a subcommittee of 3, quorum is now 2.
Okay.
So if you have 2 of that 3 get together, it's a meeting, and in order to have a meeting, you've got to do all that other stuff that I said.
Bob,
Okay.
can you speak to what the group should and should not do in email?
Yeah, that's important. That's a critical problem these days. The statute says that any time that a quorum of the public body, you being the public body, well, first it says you can only act in a meeting. And so you can't take any action at all, other than with the group physically present. And a meeting occurs, whether you are physically present or not, for purposes of notice, anytime that a quorum is engaged in communications of any kind, including electronic, that the test that I use is that are the functional equivalent of a meeting. So if 8 of you were engaging in more or less simultaneously email exchanges, so there's the functional equivalent of a meeting. You know, you're saying, hey, what do you think about this? And you're responding, I don't like it. That's a meeting, and there's no way you can have a legal meeting without a quorum physically present. So you're effectively prohibited from doing that. And as an aside as well, all of your emails in this regard become public records.
So you just shouldn't email.
With a quorum, you shouldn't email, right?
So email should be more for disseminating the minutes and the agenda. And
One way. They should go one way. If emails go one way, then they're not the functional equivalent of a meeting. But if they go 2 ways, they are.
got it.
So what's the one way? Summarize, what's the one way?
In one direction, from
direction,
the
one direction.
co-chairs or from
Do
Jan.
not, yeah, right.
Out to the
You
group.
never reply all,
So to
and you don't even
confirm,
reply at all.
we cannot ascertain whether or not there'll be a quorum before the meeting over email.
Yeah.
What we can do administratively, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, is Jessica, or I don't know who put the last agenda out, was it Jessica?
Jessica, yes.
She will say if you are RSVP to me, right? So people can respond administratively to her, not reply all. And that's okay.
Okay, reply not all.
You know, the individual communication with an administrator, either somebody working for Karen or Karen herself, is not a problem. Individual communication with her.
And then are notes subject to these right to know? Are they records, considered records, our personal notes?
Your personal notes are not,
Okay,
unless they are shared with the other members of the group.
yeah, thank you.
Aren't you glad you joined? Once you get used to it, it becomes somewhat second nature.
Sounds like we need to minimize the subcommittees.
Yeah, right?
This stuff is kind of complicated, but you know, we live in this world all day long, every day.
Too many
Get
rules.
Are there any other questions for Robert?
I think that's all that I want to know.
If this group has questions, I can take them back to Bob and bring them.
Sure.
Can-
I'll be right upstairs anyway, so just call me, I'll come back.
Thanks, Bob.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob.
All right, next we're going to hear from Sean Clancy, Assistant City Manager for Economic Development. It says he's tentative, but he's here.
It is.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Sean Clancy. I've been here with the city for 5 months, so you probably all know my predecessor, Nancy Carmer, the irreplaceable Nancy Carmer. So Will asked me to come and talk to the group, and first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of let you know what's going on from an economic development standpoint, and I'll just kind of give you my thoughts and take any questions. I have been working with Nancy and others in economic development in my role at Great Bay Community College, which was workforce development, and I think you guys all know it's all pretty related. So I had the opportunity to come in here and kind of understand the language. I had to learn a lot about public meetings. I support the Economic Development Commission, and I also am the liaison for the Arts and Nonprofit Committee. So I learned all those things that you just heard about from Bob. And yes, I remind my members, don't reply all when I send an email out. But just to let you know, so my focus really, my observation was in the last couple of years, Nancy did a great job of really helping business and industry and organizations stay alive and understand where funding was and where resources were. My challenge is now to understand kind of what's next from an economic development standpoint. And very clearly, I need to protect our diverse and vibrant economy. That's rule number one. So, we have known challenges such as housing costs and a workforce shortage, high energy costs. We're about to launch a business retention and expansion survey. We, City of Portsmouth, the Economic Development Commission, in late September to understand what's going on with the business community. But in addition to, hospitality and retail and healthcare and manufacturing, I do consider the nonprofit sector to be integral to our economy. I mean, you all know it. You're in it. So, in addition to all those businesses I talked about, I believe we have these tremendous assets, whether it's our social infrastructure, our arts and culture, nonprofit, our business and industry, and that's really what we have to offer. So, my goal is to promote that and again protect what has been built and be a facilitator within City Hall from an economic development standpoint to find resources for any organization that wants to grow and expand and build or change. Maybe there's transformation in people's future. So
Will nonprofits be a part of that business retention survey?
that's a good question. I will find out. The way it works, and the last one we did was in 2016 or 17, is request the list of businesses from the Secretary of State. I'll just double check if nonprofits are listed on that. So I will make a note of that.
I think if I can add to what Sean provides by way of introduction, for all the things that we have been doing, and to say that Sean is filling some big shoes is an understatement, it's also an opportunity to reset and look at what we need to add to the picture that we might have thought was complete heretofore, but are we including all the right constituencies in this conversation? And Sean's got an interesting background in not only the private sector, but education and workforce development. So we want to make sure that we are covering all bases, and it was good that I think it was Will who suggested you come to speak
Right.
here.
Right.
So for all the things we don't know that help round out the economic development picture for the city and the region, it would be good for you all to help inform Sean, and vice versa. Sean can share updates with the group that might be relevant.
So as an example, the other thing that's happening in the Arts and Nonprofit Commission or Committee is the AFTA survey, Americans for the Arts, which happens every 6 years, and I guess it was back in 2017. The economic impact of arts and nonprofit culture organizations was $58 million to our local economy. So we'll have to see what it comes in. It'll be closer to the end of this or next calendar year. We'll get those results. But that's just another way to look at, in my opinion, the integrated economy that we do have here. And more to come, because things have obviously changed in the last couple of years.
And how did you get that figure?
I'm sorry?
How do you get that figure?
That was put, so this is Americans for the Arts. After that's a national organization, and they provide municipalities and locations with that survey. There's a report up in my office, but
No,
that's
just-
the number we use.
I'm just wondering if it includes direct, indirect, and induced spending, because that's how we look
Well,
at.
my understanding is it's everything exclusive of the ticket price for the event.
Okay.
So it's hotel, restaurant,
Yeah,
any
okay.
other
So that would be
spending
included.
outside of the
Yep.
ticket price. Yeah, so it's a pretty significant
The
number.
group would find it interesting. You could send it to me, and Jessica
Sure.
could push it out one way to everybody.
I would find that interesting.
Sure. There's, we have other things, right? We have things like the shipyard, and they do an assessment of their impact on the economy. So again, we're really fortunate in terms of diversity in our economy. We're not just beholden to one industry, if you will. So there's a lot to understand and I think recalibrate going forward, like you all are.
In a couple minutes, we're going to talk about the charge of this committee. What is the charge of the Nonprofit and Arts Committee?
That is a really good question.
I'm just trying to see how we work to, where
No,
there
it's
might
smart.
be some.
I don't know that we could recite it. If I could scramble and talk and look at my phone at the same time, I could do that. But it was set up as a blue ribbon in the same way this was, to address needs brought about and highlighted in the pandemic, in the sense that the groups would not be competing for the same limited amount of resources, but working together to figure out how best to share those or collaborate on efforts.
One deliverable that I think they've been charged with is delivering a cultural plan. Right, the last one was completed in
20 years ago?
20 to 21 years ago. So it's time for that to be refreshed.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm learning about these things, but
I've pulled it up.
Did you?
The Blue Ribbon Committee on Arts and Nonprofits was created on January 11th, 2021, to respond to the needs of arts and culture nonprofits during the reopening and recovery phases ahead. So I think that right there is a critical piece. It's not really the Arts and Nonprofits Committee. It's only nonprofits that are in the arts and culture
that's right.
sector.
That's right.
Okay, I kept wondering why I was not invited to the
To
table.
that. Good distinction.
Okay, so that makes sense. So all of the work that's being done on that committee is focused just on the arts and culture community.
Of which there are profits and nonprofit.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Good
Okay.
distinction.
Thanks.
So when you say shipyard, are you, I'm just, from what I've heard from people, that there's an issue with the shipyard in terms of families or children not being able to go to the school there and stuff. Is that an issue that?
I just read this morning that, so they changed, something changed with the way they provide benefits to
that
enlisted families.
So those who are going to have to leave, that can no longer use those resources in terms of childcare and stuff.
Right, and what I just read this morning briefly was that the town of Kittery opened
Oh, I
child
didn't see that.
services maybe earlier, preschool, to support those
Okay.
those families.
Okay.
Just-
Well, I understand that there are also some families that live here, so I'm wondering if that
Okay.
would include them, who are not going to be able to have their children participate there.
And not to put Abby on the spot, but this would be a great example of where if the school department has had a conversation with the shipyard to know how many families that might be in the city are being impacted. But I don't know if it makes sense for Abby, for you to carry water for the administration or.
Yep, and I could find out, that piece. I know that, childcare is a huge issue, obviously. We go with this and then workforce, because people can't work after school, before school. So, it all is part of this, for sure, but finding out that direct impact, too.
Is that daycare closing, or
Yeah, I don't know.
do you know what's happening on the shipyard?
They don't have room, there's so many. I don't know what all the specifics are, I just know there are some families who live here who are, that's one of their issues,
Okay.
Any other questions for Sean?
You might be asked back. That's not a question. I bet that's a statement.
I'm available anytime.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
So I'm a good co-chair and don't have the official charge of this committee so, in front of me.
No, we could do it. Maybe we can put it on the board. That assumes I can find it and put it on the board. Bear with me a second. Okay. Would it be helpful if I read it, Kathy?
That would be great. Thank you.
The COVID Response Task Force Blue Ribbon Committee is for 6 months to evaluate challenges and identify low-cost, high-impact recovery solutions that use ARPA monies. The task force will be composed of citizens of Portsmouth, nonprofit representatives, and the city manager as an ex officio member who can incorporate city staff and resources. The initial objective of the task force would be to meet, discuss, and survey the needs of the community and incorporate their findings into a recovery plan. The task force will be fashion that input from residents. Oh boy. The task force will be fashioned that input from residents is well-defined and simple to do with public meetings in various locations and times throughout the city. There would also be a dedicated webpage on the city website that outlines the proceedings and has a contact button for residents to make recommendations and suggestions. The task force will allow the city of Portsmouth to build a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery by making investments that support long-term growth and opportunity.
So low cost, high impact
Recovery solutions
recoveries.
that can utilize ARPA money. If I can jump in here and remind the group, for those who didn't watch a meeting before, there is approximately 5.4 million of the 12.88 million that the city's received. And as you can imagine, there are,
I wonder if you could just talk just a little bit slower. I just hear what you're saying. and You're
Sure.
on to the third, statement or
Sure.
whatever. Just
Sorry.
that's
I
right.
talk fast.
I'm sure you need to do that with everyone you're working with.
So we received $12.88 million in ARPA funding. We have committed or obligated all but 5.4 million of that money. And as you can all imagine and appreciate, there are 17 different ways we could spend the rest of that money. So the group here is charged with identifying needs from the community that the city needs educating on, that we need your expertise on, that we don't know and we know that you know. And I think if Councilor Bagley were here, he would give some version of that. And to that end, there will be a work session for the whole community to weigh in and hear from both staff and city council about the future and the thought process behind the spending of that, or the obligating of that remaining ARPA money, on Monday, September 12th at 6 p.m. I believe it's here at City Hall. And,
Here,
yeah, in the council chamber,
at 7,
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Yeah, work
September
sessions
12th.
start a little earlier. And
Gee, when's election day?
the 13th, the next
13th,
day.
The next day.
Right.
Okay.
Typically, we try to hold these on Mondays because councilors tend to hold Mondays for these type of meetings, 6 o'clock. And if you cannot be there in person, you are welcome to join by Zoom. You can watch, you can participate by Zoom, just like you can live and in person. So that will be where the council hears from staff the magnitude of potential asks and uses for the funding. It will be a perfect update, a perfect time for this group to provide an update on it, progress that we have made as a group, and asks that we anticipate making if we're not ready to make one at this time. The council, to my understanding, is not looking to make decisions in the immediate term. They want to understand the depth and breadth of what are the needs out there and how do we best try to accommodate. This is well in advance of the fiscal year 2024 budget planning process, too. So as the city gears up for that, how do we reconcile the asks outside of that process? So it is not the it's not the only or first bite at the apple. It's an opportunity for the city to present what we know and for groups and individuals to weigh in. So no decisions will be made that night either. I should be clear about that. It's a work session. It's designed for give and take and public input.
So when you say a work session, just because I'm not familiar with it, so is it literally just giving ideas as our group, as individuals, as can residents and other people as well? Or
The
how does
group
that
could
work?
speak, someone could speak on behalf of the group, individual residents can speak.
Okay.
The council sits more informally, they come off the dais, they sit at work tables, if you will.
Yep.
Hear a brief presentation, and then start to talk about how it is they want to move forward. They always incorporate public comment,
Okay.
and the mayor would balance how all that time works out in about a 2-hour section of time, give or take.
So of the 12 million, you're saying 7 million, what the other 5 million will be used for? I mean, you sort of, right?
5.4 million is available to be obligated and expended, and a reminder to the group that we have until the calendar year end of 2024 to obligate.
That's this group.
No, the whole city, everybody who has any use for the money. What I think the Councilor Bagley's intent was, and please don't let me be the only person talking here, is to that the goal of this group would be to identify the low-cost, high-impact recovery solutions that could use ARPA funding to be made, to take place and to happen. But Nancy, to your point, there are lots of competing interests for that 5.4 million.
Okay. So where does the other money go?
The other 7.4 has been obligated through previous budget conversations and a whole bunch of different projects
Okay.
at the city level.
And how was that decision, how did that come about? That 5.4 would be for the community at large, so to speak, right?
It's the remaining balance of what we received in total up front, which was 12.88. So we've had a series of, it's either 3 or 4, and I'm sorry I don't have my ARPA paperwork on me, 3 or 4 budget meetings at which we said it would be prudent to spend ARPA money here instead of using taxpayer funds. And so by process of elimination, we are at the remaining balance of 5.4 million.
Okay.
So the 12.88, can we have a record of what that was spent on so that we know?
Yeah,
who
absolutely.
already got their needs met and what, you know what I mean?
I will certainly share with you the breakdown of the 12.88.
Okay.
I'll make sure it's with the next packet.
I think it's on the website, too.
It should
right?
be.
I think I looked it up, yeah.
Yep.
And it's line item.
I was wondering also what other committees, organizations are also vying for that slice of the pie that we're also looking at, to see where there might be opportunities to either identify spaces of collaboration for us and for other groups, or places where we can say, we don't need to get involved. These
Right.
folks have got it, but this group over here needs some help.
Fair.
So if we can look at, and maybe that's the opportunity at the work session. I'm almost looking at that like an opportunity for information gathering for us.
Right, who else is out
Unless-
there? Who else is
Right.
vying for this
Right.
and voicing a need? Kim McNamara, when she came to speak to us, talked about how the $65,000 that was committed from the big amount to commission the public health needs assessment, that will help inform this group of where holes might be and where folks could potentially work together. So that's one subset. Another subset would be the Arts and Nonprofits Task Force. They came out and asked the last council, and have reiterated that ask to this council, for 4% of the total amount, which would be $480,000, to go towards support of the arts and culture world. So that ask is on the table, along with lots of other asks. And there will be certainly some city asks forthcoming, additional capital improvements that if we didn't use ARPA, we would use taxpayer funding or our bond resources, things like that. So I don't mean to hog the whole conversation, but your question is well taken. Who are the folks vying for this?
Who's going to be at that, or who else is going to be at that work session?
Great question. We're going to advertise the heck out of it
Okay.
and let people know that we need to hear. I think the council is very intent on understanding who is interested and in need of resources that ARPA money could be used for.
Is there going to be like a publication of the existing proposals that were submitted to Kim and the city for the ARPA funds?
They weren't really submitted to Kim. Kim's compiling data that helps understand the profile or make up the profile. The list we have to date is really internal.
Okay.
So the idea is there's got to be more interested entities than just us, and the council is certainly intent on learning the gamut of potential asks, and then through which we have to put that through the eligibility lens and the equity lens.
Okay.
And that's their challenge. So it's a good point to stop and think. The city staff can make recommendations to council, but they are the policy-making body. So at the end of the day, we as staff implement their decisions. So they will be the ones who really make the determination of where the money should be spent. Our job is to keep us all in check with an audit or with the federal government, and to make sure that what is taking place is copacetic.
Okay, so when I heard the charge, I mean, I think what we really want to remember and focus on is the low-cost, high-impact recovery solutions that we're trying to come up with, but also that our job is really to figure out what are those needs of the community, which we've started to do by the information gathering of the people that have presented in the last couple of meetings. I agree with you, Lori, that meeting could be future information gathering. I know we're going to talk about meeting dates, but our next meeting isn't until the day after that meeting. So we might want to talk about that as well. So I guess my question now, we've heard from the people that we wanted to hear from. We talked a little bit last time about it might be time to start diving in and talking about these community needs. So the next thing is to do that. Let's jump in and talk about, and again, with the lens of, what are those overarching community needs that are impacting the entire community, and not just perhaps the lens that I have with my organization or other people have as individuals here. So,
Can I make a recommendation?
absolutely.
Just to keep it orderly and efficient, if we give each person at the table like 2 minutes to list off, and as we go around the room, we're probably going to find that we're duplicating each other.
I think that's great.
So I don't need to start, but
Yes, you do.
no. I would like to listen and then chime in where I think maybe there's.
Would somebody like to start?
I can start.
Thank you.
I think two issues pop up for me, not just for Chase Home, I think for the city. One is public transportation. That's a massive issue. I mean, Chase Home is pretty close to downtown, but we still struggle to find transportation for the clients and families and kids that we work with. That's affordable.
Didn't they just get $7 million?
They did.
Yeah, okay.
That was to build a new facility,
Oh,
right?
it is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
And they're
I'm
still
thinking
cutting
more in
roofs.
terms of.
Long
like-
term, it's probably good, but
Yeah.
short term,
Yeah, probably. I'm just thinking like it'd be great to have more routes or more buses with Coast
Oh, this is a
Bus,
good
for
time to remind
instance.
people, if you're speaking, grab the mic and have it very close to you because it's hard to hear on the production. That is Kevin, the producer.
Oh, okay. He's behind closed doors.
He is.
Okay. So that was one, public transit. And the other is, because I think we all experience it, is just a workforce shortage and how to address it. Because I think it's beyond giving people a higher wage. There's other things going on in order for us to retain staff.
That was your second one, the workforce shortage.
Yeah.
And what did you say, what would be done to?
Well, I think, well,
change?
one way is to increase wages. So it would be, making sure someone gets a hourly rate that's comparable to the work they're doing. But then there's other ways of training and other ways to retain. That doesn't necessarily mean you got to increase their wages too, or do it together. But I think there's a lot of issues going on with the workforce shortage that's beyond giving a higher wage.
Right, and New Hampshire's at, what, $7.25? And I'm sure Massachusetts is probably much higher than we are.
And workforce housing is a major issue.
Yeah, it's huge too.
Someone else want to chime in?
Just go around. It's
Just
easy
go-
for me.
Perfect. So I agree, transportation was at the top of my list, particularly as where there's the challenges of even getting Lyft or Ubers for clients that need them. Workforce, definitely. I would also add the mental health challenges that kind of go across the board in terms of lack of access to mental health services and supports, as well as the impact that the pandemic and other things are continuing to have on everybody.
I'll go next then. So I think I'm just thinking for me in particular, a lot to do with childcare, which I think does impact workforce as well, because I hear from a lot of parents and families that they don't have anywhere for their children to go after school or before school, and at 2:45 when your kids get out, that's pretty early in the afternoon. And then I think looking at COVID and what it did to a lot of students that we work with, really trying to get them back up to speed with academics, so providing some of that tutoring. I mean, food is another issue, so food insecurity, and we had free lunch and breakfast. That's gone now, so those kiddos that had it, I mean, they can still qualify free and reduced lunch, but that doesn't mean if you haven't filled out the paperwork, then you don't get that. So, I mean, I have this, there's so many pieces, but providing students with that kind of after-school care, also mental health, giving them social emotional experiences with trusted adults, mental health providers, experiences with educators somehow. Transportation, though, is another issue because I know, rec programs, Todd Henley, let's do all these things in partner. Well, we can't get kids places because I know from putting on kids at the bus, they're late, we don't have them, they're combining kids on buses that shouldn't be combined. So it is a huge issue. So if there's some kind of incentive for transportation we could give in the short term and in the long term, I know that's a huge issue.
So going off of the transportation issue, just more specifically branching out to Greenland, providing earlier stops before 8 a.m. in Dover, that would help increase the workforce. The unhoused, it is a major issue in the area, and the city hasn't assessed this. We have to date nothing to assess the actual extent and breadth of the unhoused issue, and we have a population here, and we see them at Safe Harbor, and the need is accessible housing. And in the meantime, a consistent, accessible, and staffed warming shelter. Last year, there, Tammy and her husband run Operation Blessing, ran into major shortages, had to close at 27 degrees because her and her husband were just too tired and couldn't staff it 24 hours. So coming up with the staffing solution to there, making sure she can run, maybe opening a second warming shelter, that's critical, especially in order to, well, since there's long waiting lists at the shelters and only one shelter in the city. Perhaps we can, I don't know if this is beyond our scope, but if landlords were able to accept vouchers in the area, somehow either offering education into the benefits or offering tax incentives somehow, that would solve a huge, in my mind, workforce shortage, just in the ability to allow all these vouchers to actually be used and in the area. And then that's releasing a whole untapped part of the workforce that's just struggling in housing stability. And lack of interim mental health solutions, right? And maybe there's a way to staff 2 to 3 providers on our local mental health crisis lines, something in order to bridge the gap for the 2 to 3 month wait for our local community health center. And then, to my knowledge, there's a problem in getting the kids to the aftercare in Greenland. Greenland YMCA is the spillover for the Seacoast, and I don't think at the moment they have a bus to take the kids from the elementary school to Greenland. So that's going to cause a problem.
All of the local elementary schools in Portsmouth can't get to Greenland?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, that's correct.
And let me touch upon what Whitney mentioned. No, it wasn't Whitney, it was Abby. That Todd Henley is our recreation director, and we now have lots of space for programming at the community campus. But the challenge is real for the school department. They can't find enough busing just for their primary functions, let alone an after-school program that's 4 miles down the street.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because I know last year there were days of the week that I happened to put kindergartners on the bus as part of my job, and we would be literally putting like the P3 and P2, they should be separate on one bus because we didn't have the other bus. And so I don't know how long that means the kids are on the bus, but that doesn't seem right.
This is the school bus driver shortage?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
My kids ride those buses, and they had 3 to a seat some days. They
Right, 'cause
just
they're
didn't fit,
combining
and they
them.
were so late, an hour.
Yeah.
You know, little kids on the bus for a long time, in the heat and stuff too, at
Yeah.
the end of the school year. It was every day. And parents didn't get a notification, like they just don't, we got like a note on Parent Square, like, oh, just so you know, if your kid is on P5, they're gonna ride home with P8. But you don't know how long that's gonna be, so
Right.
all the parents are standing at the bus stop throughout the city like for an hour.
Right. I mean, even us loading the kids, it's like, we're standing there, where's P2? Oh, no, you're putting them on
Yes.
P10. Oh, okay, we are.
My
Okay.
kid got on the wrong bus a couple
Yeah.
days, yeah,
It's
couldn't
so-
find him.
it's a
disaster.
It's an immediate problem.
Thank you.
Can I pause for 1 second and just ask a question to Karen? I remember at the first meeting, I apologize I wasn't here at the last one, but at the first meeting, there was a conversation about ARPA funds as it relates to the school district.
Right. Good point. Thank you for reminding me to bring that up. The school got their own ARPA money, and it comes with an acronym of ESSER, Elementary, Secondary,
School Recovery or something?
Yeah, that sounds right. I believe the total is about 3.9 million. I do not know how much of that has been obligated or expended. that is a school conversation, so maybe future speakers, we could get the superintendent or the assistant superintendent or the appropriate person.
What they've received for this year, for this coming year?
That's what they've received in total through ARPA,
Through,
the same process by which the city got the 12.88. The school department got their own tranche of, I believe it is 3.9 million.
oh, okay, that's not part of the 12 million.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, and it would be the school board's purview to decide how to spend that funding. So if we couldn't get the superintendent or the assistant, maybe the business manager, there's good options there. But you're right.
I think that'll be a really important piece of information as we begin carving out
Yep.
100%.
where, who's putting money towards what,
Right.
and what all of the monies are available.
Right, because
And-
I do know there was a conversation last year with teachers from the school board about needs, and did the school board meet last night, tonight? They're meeting sometime soon. I
Meet
think,
on
to talk
Tuesday, so it
about
could be
that.
tonight.
Okay, because I think there is some discussion about what ESSER money is going to be spent for, so I wonder if that is today.
Well, since I watched the city council meeting last night, I will watch the school board meeting tonight and see what
I
I
think it
can
might be
ascertain
tonight,
there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, so
you.
let's continue going around in the interest of time. Nancy?
I'm just going to share what I gathered from speaking with a number of people in the community. And most people said making mental health, we already said this, a priority. But racial issues were mentioned, but a number of people that I spoke with who were a diverse group, that we need to be more open and respectful of diversity in our community and help how to do outreach to make that happen. Public education issues, and I'll share who some of that came with a couple incredible conversations with police officers that work at schools. The parental needs was an issue of how, especially single moms, that were really totally out of sync with everything during this pandemic, when the children would be in school part of the time and then they'd be home part of the time. And that was not only mentioned by a couple of parents I spoke with, but also I spoke with TJ Porter. I don't know if any of you know who he is. He's the school resource officer at the middle school, and he was amazing to hear him just open up and talk about what he's experienced with the children and what needs to be done. And I was thinking it might be interesting to invite him to come and speak here with us and share what he's, and another officer came by where we were talking. We met at Prescott Park and talked outside for quite a while. Another officer came by and said, "You're talking with TJ. He's the best person to talk with in the community about what's going on with our children and families and stuff." And the parental needs were obviously incredible, but the children, their frustrations, their anxieties, their hysteria, that he just said was overwhelming. And this is middle school, right? And I think I mentioned I volunteered at in New Franklin the last 4 months of the school year, just twice a week. But it was not that I didn't know that this was going on. I mostly worked with high school students my whole life, but it was incredible to be with children who were so frustrated and so, like the students that would just knock everything off the teacher's desk out of frustration and stuff. And it took me working with them twice a week, individually, 2 months before they finally connected with me when I came in the room. And
Nancy?
by the time
I
left,
am loving what you're saying, but in light of time.
Oh, yes, 2 minutes.
We only have a few minutes left. If you have anything outside of what anybody else has said.
Okay, extremist and gun violent issues was mentioned quite a bit, too.
Thank you.
And let's see, public education, many COVID-19 symptoms, diversity, expecting. That's it. I mean, we've mentioned the other ones that I listed, but the last one I wanted to mention was extremism and gun violence and fear that they have, that we cannot think that our community is totally perfect, that this couldn't happen in our community. No. And anyway, that was it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
And I'm going to skip. I think a lot of things were
mentioned.
covered. I have a 1 o'clock hard stop. I will send out, if you want to look at our service needs assessment from 2021.
That would be great.
2020, 2021. It does, there are updated, resources that you can click the links on. So
Great.
we have to do it every 2 years for our.
Is that your copy?
Yes, I'll send it out by email.
Oh, thank you.
So Lori and Lori, do you have anything new to add that hasn't been?
Most of what affected the people with developmental disabilities was the workforce shortage and transportation and all those things. Basically, their
thanks.
lives fell apart, and their parents had to keep them home.
Great.
Even people who had been living independently had to move home with their parents. So during COVID, but it's still a huge issue. Just if
Great.
this were to happen again, it'd be nice to have it thought out ahead of time so that people would have coverage. And the other thing that came to light was how many aged parents there are of people with developmental disabilities. And everybody who thought they might die of COVID during COVID was terrified that their child would be what? They had no homes. So housing for adults with developmental disabilities has come to light as a major issue.
Great. Lori?
I think the only item that has not been mentioned is substance misuse, abuse.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So in my mind, this falls under and with mental health. So it's very hard to discern what's what. But of course, this is a very distinct medical condition. People's use went way up during COVID. Our overdose rate went up. And people were not getting the treatment they needed. So they would come in and say, we're ready. And Portsmouth Hospital will not take detox, and the closest detox facilities in Manchester, and there's often a very long wait. So we are the people, and like us, RCOs, like SOS, we are the continuum of gap fillers. We are the first responders to individuals that are waiting for services. So it's really important to continue supporting those walk-in centers and community centers.
Can I jump in with an update from the school department real quick? Abby, you were right. The school board held part 2 of their retreat last night, and the topic of ESSER was discussed. It was more about the process by which decisions will be made, but they also talked about possible investments in things moving forward, like moving the Lister Academy to community campus, that kind of thing. So it sounds like they're just beginning the outreach process.
Karen, are we all set? There's no one for public comment?
There's no one for public comment.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Good job.
So the last thing we wanted to talk about, we've identified, obviously, we all have come up with very similar needs. And so I think, in terms of information gathering, I think that meeting on the 12th or 13th, whatever it is, will be helpful to this group. I think hearing from someone regarding the school funding would also be helpful, but I think we have enough of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have enough of the people that have come to present information to us so that we can really do more to dive right in and start coming up with some ideas around these high impact, low cost.
Can somebody take the last, because I have to leave.
I got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Yep.
So our next meeting, though, to do this is scheduled for the day after on the 13th. I want to check in and see if people would like to keep that or if we'd like to try to have a meeting.
That's it. Is that election? Right.
I think our next meeting isn't until the 19th.
Oh, it's not till.
I have it on the 13th.
Oh.
We talked about the
Well, let's
13th
get this
and the 27th.
Well, and the 13th is also election.
Yeah, I
So
work
that-
at polls. They're really hurting for, that's a major, they're really looking for poll workers, They're reaching, almost each ward needs people to work. If you know of anyone who'd like to work that day, I am working that day, so, I'm elected. Right.
Well, would it make sense to try to meet either the week before so that we could get in one more meeting prior to the meeting on the 12th? I know it's the day after Labor Day, but does Tuesday the 6th work?
The Tuesday after, what,
September 6th.
September 6th? Oh, okay.
Would that work for folks?
Yes.
I'm not sure that I can come just because it's the first day of school.
Oh,
So my
Oh, okay.
school jobs, but
September 6th, what time?
Yep.
Do
but
a
the
noon.
13th is going to be tricky anyways because there's no school in Portsmouth. that
Right,
day.
there's no
So
school in-
if
yeah,
a
so
parent of a
the
school
13th
child is
yeah.
gonna be-
I think
Well,
noon
so-
again.
Noon, okay. I
Noon?
think I can do it.
Stick with the same time on the 6th?
Shall I ask Jessica to get a
That would be-
quorum count?
Yes,
For
that would
noon
be great.
On the 6th. Got it.
And Kathy, at that meeting, would the idea be too to kind of have something to present for the 12th? Just
I don't
of our
know. I mean, I
ideas?
think that that's what we want to figure out. Like,
Or at least not our ideas, but our list of needs that we just kind of created.
Yeah.
Right? It's like all of the things
It
we
would be,
just were saying.
it would
I
be
think-
really effective, sorry, go ahead.
If we could take the time on the 6th to, like, identify where the biggest priorities are
Yep.
and maybe list out
Yep.
either what organizations are working in those areas of priority and what ideas we might have around them, even just sketch it out so
Yeah.
we could present that at the work
I think that would be
session.
great.
Yep.
It would be ideal if one person spoke for the group, and if as many members of the group could come and they could be recognized by the spokesperson of
Yeah.
this group. That would be the most efficient use of
Yep.
time.
and I heard Lori volunteer, so that's fantastic.
So we could figure that out on the
You
6th.
volunteered to do that.
Oh, look out, you're going to see sticky notes and papers.
so-
and
The other thing that I was realizing is how fast 6 months goes by. And so I think it's in our best interest to get some of these meetings scheduled. Where we're looking at the 6th now, would it make sense to go with the 20th as well?
We had the 13th and the 20th out there in scheduling land. Perhaps the 13th is a...
13th is out.
Is it out?
Yeah,
it's a-
because of there being no school and elections and
Okay.
So the 6th and what would be the second?
the 6th and the 20th.
20th, okay. And they're both Tuesdays, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. 6, 9:20.
So can we check on a quorum for both of those dates, Karen?
Yeah, and you want to stick with every other Tuesday and go October 4 and October 18 while we're at it?
That would be,
let's go for it and then.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's better to get it on, I think.
Okay.
Great. So I like your idea, Lori, too, about the next meeting and preparing for them. So hopefully we will have a quorum. Do we have a motion to adjourn? I can't talk, adjourn. I can't say it. How do you say it?
Adjourn.
Adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye. She seconded
Oh, I need to write that down first.
moved.
I said I would take notes. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, and
we
the
adjourned
time.
at 1:05.
One.